I mean, just talk. Yeah, you. Then I'll let you lead the interview. This is hilarious. This is really
I know,
hilarious.
right? So what
Let
kind of
me.
intro you want me to do?
No, I'm gonna do the. I'll do the intro, and then I'll let you. I see that's probably Miss Deborah that's looking right now. Okay, so we had fun technical difficulties, and even though I always am like, okay, we're gonna start early to try to work through the technical difficulties, it's never enough time.
Never, ever, ever. I don't know what this was doing, but it finally let me in. It's crazy.
So I'll do
Okay.
just a brief little intro, and then I'm going to get out of the role of the interviewer since you're going to do the interview today. But
Yes.
let me just say this. So good afternoon, everyone. Yes, if you're watching live, we had technical difficulties. If you're watching the recording, just know that's why we didn't come on very smooth, because we were trying to just get on here. But we are finally here. I am so excited today. I know I say I'm excited every single time, but I'm really excited about this chapter, and maybe because I'm biased, because this is the chapter that I wrote, and I am particularly, I want to say, excited, and at the same time, I feel a little intimidated. So obviously, I am not going to interview myself. So what I decided to do is I decided to reach out to one of the foremost scholars on Osun globally, and Dr. Diedre Badejo, and ask her to interview me today. The reason I say that she's one of the foremost scholars is one of the books, particularly from an academic perspective, that people often refer to in terms of books, and then in terms of her work and her scholarly work, is her book is Osun Shegeshi, but she's written numerous articles, and looking specifically because she's an expert in the African diaspora. And one of the things that lets you know that she's an expert is, although she is from New York, she's an African American, then many African scholars reference her work and refer to her work. And so, thus, I feel very intimidated by asking her to
You should.
interview.
You shouldn't. You really shouldn't, because what you wrote, girl, is on it.
Oh, so that being said, I want to turn everything over. So we're going to talk about my chapter. I'm chapter 11 in the book, Making Black Lives Matter. You all know, because this is part of a series. So if you're watching today, because I actually put this one on live stream on YouTube and on Facebook. If you haven't seen the book, Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism, I will actually put a link in if you want to get an electronic copy of this book. The publisher has released the book for free to in the English version, so you can download that. But my chapter, Let the Òrìṣà Speak, contemporary traditional healing for contemporary times, is what we're going to talk about today. So Dr. Badejo, I am going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade. And
See,
I'm
she says
really,
in her Yoruba, she's better than me. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm working on it, girl. Um, but anyway, I am very pleased to participate in this program today, because I mentioned to you earlier, those of us who have been doing this for a while are trying to encourage as many young women as possible to get into this work and to continue where we will obviously leave off. The other reason that I'm excited about it is because for your generation, the way in which you're going to navigate this is going to be different than my generation and the generation before me, because there were several people before me that I relied on. And like Gloria Marshall, for example,
I feel like
who
I need to take notes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
and other sisters who either wrote in strictly the African American women's tradition or documented much of our experiences up until that point. And a lot of those women, including Geneva Smitherman, who did wonderful work on collecting oral traditions and folklore and those kinds of things, were very helpful in understanding the connection between African American thought, women's role in that, and West African tradition. Other people who worked on language, who collected like Zora's work on mules and men, and you know, what was it? Tell my mule, let my mule talk. I forget the title of
Um,
it now.
Tell My Mule. I got it behind me. Yeah. I don't know
Mhm.
why I was trying to look at the books on the shelf, but yeah, I have it. It's Tell My Mule and of Mules and
Uh-huh.
Men. Yeah.
Right, Mules and Men, and all those books were very influential in terms of shaping my generation's work. So we're passing this on to you in the same way that it was passed on to us. So I'm excited about this, and I just wanted to say that you're in the long line of Black women, women of the African diaspora and the continent, in fact, who have laid very good groundwork for you guys to really run forward with it. Sorry that you guys, it's the New York in me. Um, can't control it sometimes. So, anyway, let's begin.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with the first question.
Mm-hmm.
Where in chapter 11, Ifa is described as an oral tradition passed down through meticulous study, beginning in early childhood. And in recent times, it's been written down. There are many translations. Some of the work that I was privy to do was with Babalao and Ifanie, um, who were working on translations and so forth. So, due to that, what is the scripture called these days? Has it changed? Has it remained the same? What is the reference?
No, I mean, I think a lot of people go to what Dr. Wande Abimbola says is the sacred Ifa literary corpus. Um, what I think is really hilarious is one of my girlfriends she's very clear, she's a Black Catholic, and we have like a really good rapport. And she was like, I don't know what they say in the book of Ifa. Like if she's trying to tell me something, she'll say the book of Ifa. I was like,
Right,
it's the sacred literary corpus. But
right,
it's always like our joke. So she want to be respectful and not necessarily refer to like a scripture or Bible verse. Just like I'm just
right.
not sure what it says in the book of Ifa, but
So there are what, 401 at minimum books of Ifa?
ooh, yeah. And then they have that plus sign there, so
That's right. That's right.
you just never know. And all of those have like all these verses. They call it
Right,
essay, like all these chapters. And so some of them can be like really short lines. And like, as you know, some of them can be long paragraphs and be pages and pages long.
right,
So who knows? Who knows for sure?
right.
I mean, it's
So
a
there's a
huge
lot there.
body of literature. There is a
Mm,
lot there. And I think one of the things which I have found interesting is because we live in a Judeo-Christian society, people of course value writing stuff down, but we also know that lots of stuff that's not true can be written down or it can be changed and
mm,
manipulated. And so sometimes there's this idea of dismissing oral traditions, and we know that Ifa has been um, passed down for thousands and thousands of years orally. And so when people don't understand this oral tradition, and they haven't been educated and trained in the oral tradition, then they think that like there's this opportunity for errors. But you and I
mm,
both know if you go through an initiatory process, or if you sit and, even if you've never been initiated, if you just get divination, the amount of information that those priests have in their head is amazing. And the way that they get trained, because you see them, it's almost like it reminds me of when I was younger. And I was learning how to play cards. I was learning how to play oh gosh, I forget the name of the card. It's not spades. It's something like it's more of an old school game. I can't think of the name of it. And I was
Pinocchio?
sitting. No, not pinochle.
Mhm.
It's gonna come to me in a second. I
Right.
can imagine people, old black women smoking Newports and teaching you this game. Tonk. That's what it is.
Yeah, I forgot about that one too. You're right. You mentioned the cigarette.
It's the Newports and learning how to play Tonk. And Tonk was
Mhm.
very, and you learn, and I don't remember how to play it anymore. I was in my early 20s. And the way that you got to learn, like you sit there, there's a way that you shuffle, there's a way that you not bid, I guess that you bid. There's a whole thing about the entire process. And
Mhm.
part of the thing is you better not mess up and you better not cry.
Right.
And the whole, when you learn the old black women with the Newports, there's a
That's
particular way that they're going to teach you how to play cards so you
right.
can be good at it. And I think about that in the way that I have seen priests being trained. So
Mhm.
when you start to understand how they can, one, take on as much information, and two, be able to remember it accurately, because they're going to call you out in front of a whole group of people, and they're gonna say, they start with the person that is the newly initiated to the ones that are most senior, and everybody has to go up on the mat, and they've got to recite odu's from memory. And if you make a mistake, they're gonna call you out in front of everybody.
Mhm.
And that's what it reminds me of learning how to play tough.
Mhm.
And you better not cry.
No, 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 you can't. Don't
So
even
yeah,
no, none of that.
so that's how the sacred literary corpus has been passed down for
Right.
thousands of years. It's like, think about, like I said, your aunties smoking Newports teaching you how to play spades or tonk or whatever, pinochle, whatever they taught you how to play.
Mhm.
And they're
Yeah.
gonna make sure that you get it and that you get it right. And that's what they do with the sacred literary corpus.
Right. And there's also a value on the word itself,
Mhm.
that the word itself is sacred.
Oh, say more about that. Like, oh gosh.
Well, the word, your spoken word is your character. And so
Mm.
that's also, and we're going to get to that in a minute, but that's also part of why it's so important to remember things as is. Now,
Mm.
the what they do sometimes is they do some embellishments, but it doesn't change the text. Yeah, so you're right. That's a great analogy. Mhm.
And I remember a long time ago reading one of Dr. Abambola's works, and he was saying like the beginning. So you have an Odu, and there may be, they call them essays. So basically, like we can think of them as like verses. And so
Mhm.
at the beginning of the verse, you've got who the priest was and why the person came, and then in the middle there's a story, and there may be some flex with the story, and then at the end, like whether or not the client did what they were supposed to do and like what was the outcome. And so
Mhm.
those kind of beginning and end pieces stay the same, and there may be, like you said, that embellishment in the middle. And he broke it down beautifully in a way
Yeah.
that I can't even begin to do.
Yeah, yeah, that's I know the reference you're making. It's wonderful, and does help to clarify for people who don't really understand how this functions. The introduction, the middle, and the end, and how the people are trained and so forth.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. So, in what ways can we visualize the concept of Iwa Pele? And how is it applied to anti-Blackness, raceness, and misogynoir?
Oh, now I feel like I gotta look in my book, because remember I wrote this chapter almost like over a year ago. So like right, let me go back. Okay, so first, let me just talk about Iwa Pele. I didn't say it right. So listen to Dr. Badejo, not the way that I say it. Iwa Pele. So Iwa, in the chapter, I'm talking about just the concept of Iwa. So that's just basically character. And lots of times when you look at the literature describes different concepts, personifies this different concepts. So in this particular Odu, then Iwa is personified as a woman. And so Iwa is just character. Pele is gentle. So in English, we translate that into good character. And what I think is really interesting about the story of Iwa, in this particular Odu that I use for the chapter, is that she marries Orumala, who's the god of destiny. And before she starts out in her relationship, she's just like, look, all right, I'll marry you, but I have some boundaries. And she outlines her boundaries. So she tells him, don't ever, be disrespectful to me. You can't be abusive, and you can't tell me to leave your home. And so Orumala agrees to that, and they get married. And when they get married, both of them are young, Orisha ages, which is probably, only a couple of hundreds of years old. And they're both doing stuff to each other. So Iwa is not necessarily cleaning the house the way she's supposed to, or, taking care of her husband. Orumala has got like a bad temper. And so they're going back and forth, and they're bickering and arguing, and they're just not getting along because both of them, their character is like really shaky. And so eventually, depending on where you get the story from, either Orumala kicks her out, or she just leaves on her own. But she goes back to her father's home in heaven, which is Suuru, or patience. And so when she leaves, when Iwa, her character, leaves Orumala, then he starts having all these problems in his life. His life is just, his clients don't come, his money's not right, his household isn't right. And so he begins to look for character again. And when he finds her, he goes to her, his father-in-law's house, finds her, and she's just like, look, I'm not going to come back physically, but I will stay with you in the spiritual sense. And what you need to understand is that you need to, if you ever want to have money, if you ever want to have a happy household, you want to have a good relationship, you want to have prosperity overall, you want to have plenty of clients, then you have to have character. And most people, when they think about that story, they think about Iwa Pele, and they only are thinking about Orumala, and that Orumala needed to, his character was shaky. He made an agreement. His character was shaky. And so then he's reminded, like, you got to keep your character together. I think it's important for Black women for us to look at Iwa. So for a couple of reasons. One is because she is clearly saying, this is what my boundary is. I'm going to set this boundary, and I don't want you to cross it at all. And when she's in this relationship with her husband is crossing that boundary. So he's disrespecting her. He's being abusive. And she's just like, you know what? Deuces, I'm out. And then when he decides, like, oh, I want to try to get myself together, can you come back? Then what she does is she still sets a boundary there. And I think that that's important when we're dealing with racism, when we're dealing with white supremacy or misogynoir or hate of Black women specifically. Sometimes what we think about doing is we think about compromising, and we don't want to be too difficult, or we don't want to speak out, and we don't want to say things, and we just don't want to necessarily set boundaries. And Iwa's telling us that part of Iwa Pele, part of good character, is to set those boundaries. Is somebody disrespects you, one, they need to own it, that they need to acknowledge what they did, and that they need to actively demonstrate behavioral change. And if we think about that in terms of this country, that ain't never happened.
Right. Right. Right.
But we're seeing in these sacred Odus and the sacred Ifa literary corpus, it is saying, like, look, if somebody's out of order, then you need to make sure that they acknowledge what they've done, and you set a boundary with that individual, and that they need to demonstrate that they have changed. You don't just roll back up in there like everything is okay. And I think that is like a major lesson, particularly for Black women, that we need to continuously hold people accountable in the United States. If you think about, let's just go really quick with the Biden administration. So everybody was tired of the orange dude. And so they went and they voted for the Democrats, and they voted for the Biden administration. And there's a lot of things that the Biden administration is just whacked on. When we think about voting rights, it's like, dude, you need to do something about these voting rights. You need to have some courage, grow some balls, and do something about the situation. And when we think about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, anybody could have seen that coming. And so these kinds of things that are happening, we need to hold the United States government accountable for all the changes that are happening in the South. And I'm going to stop on this, but all the changes that are happening in terms of voting restrictions and all the like, you can't, that people don't want you to talk about critical race theory, which folks in undergrad or K through 12 are not talking about critical race theory. I never heard of it until I had a whole Ph.D. So these concepts, I think, are important for us to remember, that we need to hold a fire underneath the feet of people that call themselves our allies, and to hold people accountable for the white supremacy that is inherent and systemic in this society, and not just be like, oh, okay, they're doing the best they can. No, they're not. Anyway, that was a lot.
That was excellent. That was really good. The reason I really want to emphasize how good that is because it does what the study of Yoruba tradition and Ifa um, in the diaspora is supposed to do. And that is to give us a grounding in something that is inherently part of our legacy as a people, and gives us a way to understand what we're uncomfortable with.
Mm.
And I want to use it that way, not just talk about the oppression, but our discomfort, because we have a right to be comfortable, but we also are uncomfortable. So it's not just, some people don't like us, blah, blah. This is really a discomfort, which is a disservice. And I think that Iwa has certainly demonstrated that. Are you familiar with the proverb Iwalewa?
I heard, say more about it. I've heard somebody lecture on it, but say about it.
It translates as character is beauty.
Mm.
So that's the other side of that story between Orunmila and Iwa, was the idea that beauty is not necessarily something physical or something that's manifest. It's also character. And the
Mm.
character, our character, in terms of as women, Black women in particular, dealing with oppression and racism and misogyny and all of that, is our lead in
Mm.
so many ways. And I think that what you're speaking of in terms of Iwa and setting boundaries
Mm-hmm.
is also a function of character. And I really like the way you put that.
I'm loving that. Okay, character is beauty. And then I just was writing down. So I told you I'm taking notes, even though you're interviewing me. I'm taking notes because we have a right to be comfortable. And when you think about that in terms of the Orisha not sitting there, particularly Osun, she ain't sitting there. She is not about to be uncomfortable
Mm-mm.
with nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. She's not having it.
It's just not, she is not having it at all. Yes,
Mhm.
and we have the right to comfort as Black women, as Black people in
Right.
the African diaspora. We have the right to comfort, and we have the right
Mhm.
to be clear about what it takes for us to feel comfortable. Oh, that actually reminds me. So in Florida, where they passed that bill that's basically an anti-critical race theory bill. And the bill, the way that it's written, it says that you cannot do any kinds of trainings that make people feel, basically white people feel uncomfortable because of what their ancestors did or did not do. So you're codifying in law that white people have the right to be comfortable. So if you codify that they should be comfortable, then what does that mean?
That means we got to be comfortable too. Hello. Because there's no law that says that somebody's comfort should be at the expense of somebody else's discomfort.
But that's what it's essentially saying.
Right. But that's where the challenge is.
And I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know what people are doing on the legal end, because I'm like, the thing about racism is that it's an illness. It just, you can't think straight. All you thinking is through a lens of hate. And I was like, these people passing all these laws saying, you know, what you can and can't do, and all you're going to end up doing is creating a cycle where people are going to come back around and use those laws against them because of that level of hate. Because you're right. So like when you think about it, like, so you can't do trainings, you can't do anything, you can't do educationally that makes people feel uncomfortable. So what do you think the little Black children are experiencing? What do you think the brown children are experiencing? What do you think all the non-white children are experiencing in class when the history that is being taught about what their ancestors did or didn't do is so negative? You don't think it makes them uncomfortable? Hey, that's a whole other thing.
Right. But that's the usefulness of this work. So you have a different perspective then to make a case that doesn't get entangled in Western thought in the way that we usually end up getting entangled in it. Because you're bringing a perspective that's based on something else. And not that this is pure or that, you know, everybody is walking around on a cloud because they're saints. That's not what we're saying. But you have a perspective that is a legitimate perspective from which to make a case. In addition to the case that you make with the law that you have.
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is really, I think, a very, very good segue from what you just finished. In what ways does the concept of Ori help women of African ancestry navigate anti-Blackness?
Okay. So Ori, so when we think of Ori, it's talking about head. So Yoruba people are going to talk about, and I talk about two concepts, but I've read literature that talks about more than two concepts. So we're only going to stick with two concepts. So you get your physical head, which is, you know, here that we know about, and then your spiritual Ori, which is through your navel. And so you got these two different types of heads. So a lot of talk when you get readings in Ifa or in Murundi Lagoon, then people are going to talk about your Ori and whether or not you need an Ori cleansing, whether or not some people have good Oris, some people have bad Oris, and that can impact your destiny. There's all kinds of stuff that can end up happening. And again, I'm going to take a little peek at my stuff since I wrote this over a year ago. And the thing to know about Ori is that everybody has one. Obviously, everybody has a head. And the way I think about the concept, and I'd be curious, Dr. Badejo, how do you think about it? I think about it just in terms of intuition. Well, in two ways. One, an intuition, and one is your connection to your ancestors. Because if you're thinking about Ori being the way that people feed their Ori is one through your physical head here. There's also like a spiritual icon for the Christian folks out there to be some kind of idol, whatever. It's an icon, and you would feed it through your navel. And so there's a symbolic connection for me, my connection to myself through my navel, where that's my umbilical cord, and I was connected to my mother, who was connected to her mother, to her mother, to her mother, that goes on. So you've got this ongoing ancestral connection. And so when we're talking about the concept of Ori, then we're basically saying, one is that you're connected to this long line of female ancestors. That's one. And number two, that through that connection, you also are having information given to you. Your intuition is being fed. And so even if we think about that area just kind of in your middle, your solar plexus, that's in that same area. And that's usually where people say like they have gut feelings or their intuition. And what I know in this country is that people in general, but particularly Black women, are encouraged to doubt their intuition, to doubt whether or not it's real, that doesn't have any factual basis. And so whatever your gut instinct is, or whatever like your spirit is telling you, then it's like, no, well, but what's the logical conclusion? That's not necessarily logical. Like, so sometimes what is happening is you may be driving down the street and your intuition tells you turn left here. And that's not necessarily the logical thing to do, but your intuition says that. Now, I know that I've had that happen, and I was able to avoid an accident, like a traffic accident, and so able to get to my my destination on time. And so part for me of like really pushing against white supremacy is being able to cultivate your connection with your ancestors and your own personal intuition.
Mhm.
So you can have clarity there. And that means a couple of things. So people are going to push back on me. I see a couple of people talking. So if y'all have questions or comments or thoughts, and I see Dr. Stewart, hey, I saw you made a comment, then I would love to hear your thoughts. But if you're constantly full, if you're eating too much, so you know how you get full and you have that kind of sick feeling, it's like, but if you're constantly full, you can't connect with spirit.
Right.
If
Right.
you are constant with anxiety and depression and just like worry all the time, then you can't connect with spirit.
Mhm.
If you're under the influence of a lot of drugs, you can't connect with spirit. So there's all these things that we have to think about in terms of how we're dealing with our body that can get in the way of our connection with our intuition. And so what I talk about in the chapter is for women to begin to step by step just think about how do they connect with their intuition, whether that be through writing, through deep breathing exercises or meditation. Or I told you this morning I ran across town to do my yoga class. I wasn't good at yoga because I have done it every day this week, and so I'm like all like overwhelmed. My muscles are sore, but being kind of just present on your mat during yoga, those things are the things that help people to cultivate their intuition. Prayer, and not just like, oh, please don't let me get in trouble or get me out of this situation, but really cultivating a relationship with God, however you define her, is one way to be able to further connect with your Ori. The other thing, and this goes back to the food thing, is not just being too full, but one of my Achilles heels is you being addicted to all that sugar. So when you focus on and you're eating a lot of sugar, the sugar is keeping you at, like it's changing your blood sugar level, and it's keeping you on this high all the time. And you're not really be able to connect truly with your intuition and your inner self, your inner guide. So those are the things that I think that are important for us to do. And I think we need to start doing training young people to cultivate their intuition.
Yeah.
And actually, okay, let me say one more thing. Think about all the people that are following that orange sociopath still, that don't want to hear anything about the fact that, I mean, it's clear the 50 million crimes that he has committed over his lifetime. And when you look at them, and I don't think people talk about this, it's clear those people have no sense of connection with their intuition. Because anybody that had an authentic self sense with their intuition would be able to tell that this person is a criminal.
Right. Born criminal.
A born criminal. Born. Born and bred criminal, yes. And so that says a lot when you can't see right what's in front of you. And I think a lot of people are doing that. I see Dr. Moore. She's saying meditation, prayer, massages. Oh, massages. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Yes, massages, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That was wonderful. You are so right about Ori and the connection between Ori and intuition. And the other aspect of Ori, maybe we can just talk about a little bit,
Mhm.
is the Ori that's the inner head.
Mhm.
So it's intuition, but it's also what we come into the world with. And I think for African Americans,
Mhm.
we don't realize that we're born with certain talents. We always have, because that's how we're trained to think of
Mhm.
ourselves as being externally driven all the
Mhm.
time. But we're not always externally driven.
Mhm.
We may react to external stimuli or challenges that we face in this world, but we also come with something.
Yep.
And that's part of our Ori. That's the Ori Inu, the inner head. So let's talk a little bit about that, how that Ori comes into being, and how that will help in terms of anti-Black racism.
Okay, so I'm gonna take another story that's not even in the book. So there's a story
Mhm.
about the creator of Ori. The Ori New is Afuwape. I'm probably saying the name wrong. I think that's how it is. Do you remember? You remember that, Odu, Dr. Badejo?
I'm trying to
Um,
remember which.
Afuwape. Oh gosh.
No,
Um,
I'm
I'm
not pulling it up.
I gotta think of what book it is in. But okay, so
Um,
y'all, I'm janky on this. I'll go back later and find it, and then I'm gonna actually post it in. So I apologize because I didn't even expect to talk about this, or I would have
mhm.
had everything and
Oh, that's
names
okay.
and all that stuff right.
I'm sorry, I
But
didn't mean to throw that at you.
no, no, no. I think this is good. This is good. So basically, Afawapi is one of those folks that he will make sure he crafts these heads. So everybody gets to come and choose their head. So there's no idea that somebody else is doing something external from you. So I know from my friends from a Judeo-Christian perspective, which is nothing wrong with that, is this idea of like God gives you your destiny and God like sets things out for you. So in Ifa, it's different. You choose your destiny. You choose the people that you're coming, back to have a relationship with. So if you don't like your parents, that's on you. Because you're the one that chose that. And you also choose your Ori. And you can't tell whether or not somebody has a good Ori or a bad Ori. So Afawape, this brother, he makes all these Oris and he's really good at it. But some of the Oris, they can look good on the outside, and they're made of clay. But some of them are not necessarily, he forgets to put them in the clay oven because he's always doing something. So he's got a lot of debts. So he's hiding out from his debtors, and he just got a lot of chaos going on in his life. And so you may have, if you're not careful, you may have gone in and you look at an Ori and be like, oh, that's a beautiful Ori, but nope, it's not a good one. And so there's the one story where they're talking about actually I'll take it in a different direction. So basically what they're saying to you is that you can have someone that has a good destiny and a bad Ori. And so if you have a good destiny, but you have a bad Ori, that means you're going to make bad decisions, or you're not going to use your talents, you're going to ignore your talents that you came to the world with, then your destiny is not going to be necessarily good. So it's going to ruin your destiny. Or you can have someone that chose a bad destiny, but they have a good Ori, one of the ones where he made sure that he put it in the fire and it was fired correctly, and it's gonna help you through the world. And so it will make if you have this good ori, so you're using your talents, then that ori will help make a bad destiny better. And so I think what ends up happening here is that, kind of in two different ways. So you're making me think, when it is to benefit capitalism and white supremacy, then people will see your talents and attempt to cultivate those talents so they can profit off of them. Think of basketball players or people that play sports. Think of scholars like yourself, where people will see that talent and they want to use it and they elevate you, and but it's usually to their financial gain. That's one way that I think that ori gets utilized in this society. On the other hand, I think what ends up happening is we get the message very early that we may have these talents, but those talents not going to necessarily make you money, so don't do that. You may be really good at something, but that's not going to make any money, so you need to go and do computers, or I don't know, something with cryptocurrency or some other kind of random thing, as opposed to focusing on what you're good at. So a good example that I have is, and I'll stop right here, is for myself. I remember when I was little, my dad would write these letters, and my dad was always like just a good writer. And I just remember that from being a little kid. And so then as I got older and moving through school, I would get feedback that I was a good writer. Like, okay, I'm a good writer. And now I have this experience of when I'm writing. So I don't, as a psychologist, I don't actually do therapy. I do a lot of assessment. That's the only thing that I do. And when I am writing, I'm listening to someone. I am hearing, in not a voice, but I'm hearing the words in the sentences. And it's basically like something like I literally will hear the sentence and I just type the sentences as I'm hearing the sentences. And I didn't realize that that was a talent. So when I first started my business and other people couldn't do that, I was like, what's wrong with y'all? Until one of my doc students was like, Ife, you realize that's not normal, right? And I was like, really? But no one had ever told me that this is something that is within you, that comes from your dad, that then I saw it cultivated in my daughter. So this is something that is passed down generationally, that is a talent that needs to be cultivated. And so I would also say, just to kind of answer that question, is that it's always important for us to be clear about what our talents are, what are the things that come from heaven, if you will, from that we have chosen, and for us to be able to cultivate those talents and nurture those talents, and use, when appropriate, use them for our own financial gain and not use them for other people's financial gain.
Great.
I feel like that's a long answer, but
No, it's good. I remember now. I just want to throw this in there in case anybody wants to look this up. So the reason I didn't recognize what you were mentioning is because the in a language area that I was doing my research, the creator of heads is called Ajala.
I said Alphawape. Alphawape is the person that goes to get his head. Ajala is the person that creates the heads.
Right. That's why I
Thank
didn't.
you.
I was trying to put it together, and yeah, it's Ajala. Ajala. And so yes, Ajala makes the head and shapes the head, and it's also Obatala who can mess up destiny sometimes.
Should
Um,
we go there? Should we go there and say a little bit about Obatala?
we can, but I want to get back to this one thing
Okay.
with destiny,
Mm-hmm.
and why I think it's important to mention this in terms of African Americans, because we do come here with talents. We do come with challenges. That's just part of life and part of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we have not been, I don't want to say it that way. Let me say it this way. One of the things that has impeded us in so many ways is that we have not been free completely to exploit our own talents, which is
Mhm.
what you're saying.
Mhm.
Um, and we're so busy fighting an external presence that we sometimes get distracted away from what we're supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Um, so we can look at medicine, for example. There are many people, many Black people, who have a intrinsic understanding of health and health systems.
Mhm.
And we know this because I grew up with them. I'm sure
Mhm.
you grew up with them too.
Mhm.
People who just knew. Maybe they knew something from their mother or father or grandparents or aunties and uncles, but they know, but they're not encouraged. In fact, they're discouraged from following that path. Well, that's their head.
Mhm.
That's their inner head. And one of the things that I think is important for us to consider is that in this fight that we're in, um, we have to ensure that as a people that we have clearance. We talk about clearance, which is the space between a certain reality and
Mhm.
what we can do, that we need that clearance so that we can pursue what we're sent here to pursue. And you
Yeah.
think of all the talent that we have lost um, through this diabolical system that oppresses Black people in so many different ways. But that's our other challenge, is to recognize that we're not just coming here with nothing, that we come into this world with something.
Yes, Ashe, Ashe to that. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, so Dr. Badejo is right. That it's Ajala who's the creator of the heads. See, I told you I had the story messed up because I wasn't planning on telling that story.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about
I can even find
it.
the Odu later on. So Afawape is the person that goes to get the head and he ends up with a messed up head. But that's a whole other kind of thing.
Right.
But
Mhm.
so that's so interesting because it actually makes me think of something. And I went to yoga. So I was at the studio for like 4 years going
Mhm.
consistently. And it's a little skinny white woman that owns the studio. And first time I went, I was like, that white girl ain't gonna be able to. She only weighed maybe $1.25 at most. And that first class, I was like, whoo. And so then, like 4 years later, I was like consistently going and haven't gone since the pandemic. So Monday was my first day back in 2 years. And she has a very particular style that I like, and she's a trained pianist, and so she's very good with the music, and she understands something about the music and helping you be able to kind of get through particular transitions so you can get through the classes. And she does it in a very talented way. So I'm not gonna front. I don't want to take anything from her. She's excellent in what she's done, and she's grown all these studios over the years because she's good at what she does. And so I went to her class. And then the other day on Wednesday, I went to another person's class because I was like, oh, shit, they've got some Black teachers now. And so let me go to, check out some of the sisters. So I went to this one class, and I don't want to take anything away from her. And I see this at studios sometimes, is the people that get hired, they mimic the owner or the person that's the manager. And she was mimicking the manager. And I was like, but that's not you.
Mhm.
And she wasn't showing up in her full Blackness. And of
Right.
course, I didn't say anything. I just went through the class. And it was so interesting because I could see that this woman has a talent as a yoga instructor. But the whole time, my spirit was like, you need to be you And I was like, I'm minding my own business. But I, if I was in therapy with her, if I was her therapist, I would tell her, find your own way of leading the class as opposed to trying to mimic someone else. And that's kind of what I see sometimes, is that people are trying to mimic someone else. They're looking for an example of who to be that is outside of themselves as opposed to looking within.
Right. Yes.
And
Looking
that
for
gets
their
her.
Ori.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Searching externally for this Ori and this connection, but you're not going to get it that way. That's not going to happen at all, because the owner's good at what she does because she does her.
Right.
As a trained pianist and a yoga instructor, she does her. Mimicking her is not going to be helpful to you.
Right.
So that just really sat on me. And I thought about like making a post, like how do I make a post? I didn't want to call them out or anything, or call her out, but I just, that really sat on me to watch her, and just, I was thinking like, it would be so great if we saw you show up as opposed to you trying to show up as someone else. I do see a question in the chat if we want to answer the question. Maybe we can both tackle this question. Dr. Moore says, how do you suggest we get them to align the inner head and the intuition?
As you were speaking, I thought about, well, two things. One is, of course, the divination process,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially when
Well, you got to
there.
explain divination, because some people may not know what divination is.
Oh, okay. Well, when you consult with an Ifa priest or a priestess, for certain types of consultations, um, you usually have more than one person present. And the other people who are around are not to not to watch what's going on, but to participate, because it's
Mm-hmm.
a communal activity. And in that way, you're getting sort of a full reading or a full consultation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will come in, especially people who are called adept at what they're doing, and they will be able to read the situation. And we know people like this. We got them in our community. They walk in a room and they read everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's their intuition at work, and they can help people to align their intuition along with their outer head, but that takes practice. One of the things, I went through years of Eastern philosophy and yoga and all the rest of it, and learned several traditions of meditation. I think when um, one is given an Odu, that Odu can be meditated upon, that will help to identify the inner head, but also help to drive an understanding of how to utilize our intuition, because we all have it, but we don't necessarily know it, or we don't have confidence in it.
Hmm. I never thought about meditating on that, on a particular Odu. Huh. Okay. I like that. I mean, I was gonna go to the basics, so you went all like, you gave like
I'm
the old.
following your lead, sis.
I was gonna do the basics. So for me, in terms of alignment, is that we need to begin to think about our head as not just something where we got all this hair on it, but to really think of it as a spiritual force
Mhm.
and to treat it as such. So just think about it. If somebody came up and pat your child on the head, you'd be like, back up, don't do that. We take our hair seriously, and so think about what you are putting on your head If you're putting a lot of chemicals on your head, I know we got more of a natural hair movement, so people are not necessarily doing that. What you're covering your head at night, because Black women, we like to cover our head. I'm bad at it. That's why my ends will all be broken, because I'm very bad at covering my head at night. But if you're covering your head, I would never suggest that people cover their hair with black. Because black absorbs, I mean, at nighttime, because black is it absorbs a lot. And so if you are already like a sponge where you're absorbing a lot of energy, you don't need to be in the dark at night with your head covered with a black scarf or anything, or head scarf. A lighter color scarf would be better, or something that doesn't have a lot of confusing patterns. Something that has like a clear, just one solid color kind of pattern would be a lot better for you to have clarity. Washing your head. So in Ifa, there's a lot of rituals that talk about cleansing the ori, and those are things that have to be done by a priest, but you can still clean your head. So washing your hair, taking
Hello.
care of your hair, combing your hair, cleansing your head with something that makes you feel good, and then cleansing your thoughts. So, I mean, I can get in those spirals, and I feel blessed, and I'm surrounded by people that wish me well. And so if I get in like a little spiral where I'm like, oh, what was me? That part of just, being ungrateful, being depressed all the time, or being negative all the time, that clouds that connection with your intuition. And then the other thing is, half the time, what I am noticing is that people just don't want to listen to the Ori, because then you got to make hard decisions.
Hello.
I used to have a client that used to say, it's time to make simple but difficult decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is, at one point, you got to make that simple decision, and it's going to make you feel uncomfortable, but you just keep doing that. And the more that you do that, then the more that you will notice that your intuition speaks to you more clearly.
Right. Right. And that means that sometimes you have to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
If you're around activity and noise and distractions all the time, you can't hear your intuition because it's being blocked.
Mm-hmm.
So that time of silence, I love silence. I mean, just some days where I just really just want to be quiet. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing what you hear, um, both internally in terms of your inner head, but also externally in terms of what's going on around you. And that solitude is one way to connect your intuition with your inner head, because what ultimately happens is that something will pop in your head that maybe you did a few years ago that you really enjoyed doing, and you totally forgot about it or pushed it to the side. And then something will say, remember when you did that? Why don't we do that again?
Mm-hmm.
That's the connection between your inner head and your intuition, but it requires that we take time um, to ourselves. Remember grandma used to sit on the front porch or the back porch in perfect silence.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
She was connecting
Cultivating
to herself. Yeah.
it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally agree with that. There are times where I'll sit in the car, and I'll just be driving, and I won't have anything on.
Mhm.
When I was completing my internship, I would drive back and forth from um, Alabama to Atlanta, and it was like a 2-hour drive, and I would just drive in silence.
Yeah.
And like these powerful messages, I didn't necessarily want to hear the messages because it's calling me out on some stuff, but I would get that. And then even like here, so I'm in my office. You were just seeing a
Mhm.
small portion of it, but I'm in my office, and then to my left, I have this massive ancestral altar.
Yeah.
And so I light a candle there. I mean, I have all these pictures, I have all these things. I have the egungun masquerade, all the stuff there. And again, I don't hear voices, but I'll have like this intense knowing or this intense sense of something needs to be done. I remember I was couple of weeks ago, I made Sunday dinner and I made like greens, macaroni and cheese, some fried fish, some cornbread, some green beans. And I came down. I didn't even, and I had just forgot it wasn't on purpose. I came down and my ancestors, I could have swore they was like, so we taught you how to cook all of that, and you ain't bring no kind of plate for us. No,
Like, what's up with
no
that?
plate. It just came to me like literally it just came to me because they were like literally, and I always give my ancestors credit for teaching me how to cook because I didn't learn when I was growing up. It's literally ancestral memory that allows me to be able to cook, and they were like literally like, we can't get no kind of plate, not even a small plate to taste. But we didn't help you make the food, okay. And so I just laughed when that came to me, and I was like, all right. So I turned to them, I was like, all right, I'll bring you a plate. And I, took them a plate of food. So if you have those experiences like that, just honor it.
Right.
And the more and more that you honor it, and then you notice the results, and you can even write down, journal the results, then you'll know that you're connecting better with your intuition and also that ancestral connection.
Right. And it's like that voice telling you to make that left turn and don't go straight.
Mm-hmm.
We hear
Mm-hmm.
those little things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It just pops in, and
Mm-hmm.
that's our intuition. But that intuition is usually coming from our inner head. That's the head that's working in our favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know how much time we have left.
Just a little bit.
Okay. So, we got to go here. So, how does Oshun, within the Yoruba ontology, which is important, encourage
Mm-hmm.
autonomy and resilience of women of African descent in the combat against white supremacy?
Woo! Okay, so let me peek real quick. Oh, boom. So one of the things that I did in this, I couldn't remember what I wrote, but I just my eye went right to it.
Hmm.
Is I chose the Odu Oshe Torah. So I chose two different Odus. I'll talk about both of them, but one is Oshe Torah, and so yeah, correct me if I say anything wrong. So Oshe Torah is the Odu that talks about when a particular set of Orisha, they're called 17 Orumile. So these are the only Orisha that come directly from heaven down to the earth. So these divinities come down, and they are the ones that are charged by Olodumare, or God, of setting up the world and making it a good place, a comfortable place for all of us. Of those
Hmm.
17 Orisha, there's only one female Orumile, and that is Oshun. And so Oshun comes down with the male Orisha, and the male Orisha is set to, doing all of their stuff. So they're making all these plans, they're deciding all these things. You do this, you do that, and they totally ignore Oshun. And Oshun, she likes being comfortable. So I'm just imagining that she just sat in a comfortable chair like the one I'm sitting in, and she just sat back. They ignored her, and she's like, all right, have at it. And she said nothing. And what the male Orisha started to realize, the 16 of them started to realize, like, wait a minute, nothing's working. The crops that they were trying to make flourish, they weren't flourishing. Women weren't having children. Families weren't flourishing. There was no prosperity on the earth. So they all travel back up to heaven, and they ask, is it Arumala, or did they ask Olodumare?
Olodumare.
Olodumare, thank you. Okay, so they asked Olodumare, they're like, okay, you sent us down here to get everything ready on earth, but nothing is working. And so Olodumare said, well, what happened to the woman that I sent down? I sent down Oshun. What happened? And they were like, oh, she's a woman. Psh, we just let her to the side. And Olodumare said, all right, look, y'all might want to go back down there and apologize to her and be nice to her, because she's got the key to what you need. So the 16 male Orisha go back down to earth. They apologize to Oshun, and they make amends. And then Oshun is like, all right. And she lets go of her ashe or her power. And her power is the power that's needed to make the earth flourish.
Mhm.
So in that story, you got, again, it's 17. You got 16 males, one female. The one female is the power that they needed to make everything work. Them 16 males could not make it happen. And so I talk about the fact that we need to recognize that as women, particularly as Black women, we must recognize our own power. If you look in the Odus, if you look for people that have gone to initiatory experiences on the continent and going back in Nigeria and Togo, what you'll know is that even when it's something that is traditionally a male or thought of as a male kind of spiritual practice, women have to be there. The
Yeah.
women are the ones that have the ashe. We're the ones that birth the process. And so for Black women, we need to recognize that we're birthing a lot of processes in this country. For all women, the only way that you're going to get here on this earth is through a womb. That is the only way that you're gonna show up. And so it's interesting that you got all this hostility that happens towards women when you need women in order to show up on this planet. But that's a whole other kind of thing. And so it's this reminder for Black women that you've got this power. Do not release that power. If somebody gonna disrespect you, hold your power back. If people at your job or you're in your relationships with other people or however you're interacting with people, if they are not respecting you, then you should not be using your talents to help them prosper.
Right.
And I think that is the key message, the key takeaway from Osun is that she was not going to let people disrespect her and dishonor her and her talents, and then give them those talents to make them rich or prosperous. Not gonna
Right.
happen.
There's one other thing that she does. What is it? When they come back down, they come to visit her. Do you remember?
What is it?
Olodumare tells the males that they have to go and ask her what she wants.
Oh, and that's how she gets divination?
Mm-mm.
Merendila? No. Oh.
No, they have to come down and ask her what is it that she
Mhm.
wants so that she will forgive them.
Oh.
And she says, I want the same thing that you have that you're using to make the world. And they have to give her everything that she wants. She wants the divination. And what she ends up with is the Merindin Logun, the 16 calorie divination, the short verse of the divination. It's the same divination. It's
Mm.
just a shorter version of it. Okay. And
So
so
which I'm
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead, Dr.
No,
Badejo.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
Ask the question.
No, 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 no. Go ahead. I want you to finish that.
So what she does is actually say, you've been over here busy doing all this stuff. It didn't work for you, but I know that it has power. The only way that you can release that power is by sharing it with me. And the
Mm.
only way that I am going to open the pot that activates what you have done is if you do that.
So what I wanted to say is what y'all have to realize, and this is why I was saying at the beginning, like I feel intimidated. So when I am talking about this part, if you read that chapter, that paragraph, I am quoting Dr. Badejo because she's the one that wrote well, she didn't write the original story, but she is the one that's helping, in terms of the translation, in terms of English, for us to be able to understand. So she got details that like I totally missed that. So basically, she's negotiating. She's also teaching Black women before you go up there and share your ashe, share your power. You need to negotiate appropriately
Right,
and
right.
get everything because she
You
got
can't just
everything.
you don't just give it away. And if you do, there's got to be a hook on the end of it so you can pull it back when you want to. Because you know, Shun don't mess around.
Oh man. No, I did not know that. Okay. Or
Hmm.
I shouldn't say I didn't know it. I think I just glossed over that part, but that's important. Now it makes me like, dang, I wish I would have put that in there too. Gosh, that's important.
When you do the second edition, you can.
There you go. There you go. Okay, and then I want to talk about the second one. Okay, so that was Oshe Torah. There's also
Hmm.
one, and so remember, Dr. Badejo just talked about Mirindi Lagoon, which is it's also a divination system. So there's multiple ways to divine or contact God and your ancestors. And so Oshun is the one that had this Mirindi Lagoon system.
Hmm.
And in the Odu Oshe, there's this story about the women. And so again, I get this from Dr. Badejo's book, is there's this town of women. And the women, and she probably can expand on the story in a better way than I can. The women decide that they're gonna leave the men because the men are just a hot mess. So they get themselves together and they go and they create their own town. And then the men, of course, are upset because everything is an array and they're not getting none. So they pissed off.
And they're not eating.
They're not eating. Nothing, nothing is going right. And so because they're upset, they're like, okay, when we need the king is like, okay, well, I need you to get the men back. I mean, excuse me, the women back. And so the Orisha, the male Orisha are like, oh, I can do this. And let me see, who's the first male Orisha to go? I think was it Shango that first goes?
No, it was Ogun.
Ogun first goes. So that's the divinity of war. So
Mhm.
Ogun thinks that he's gonna go and just wreck shop.
You know,
And he
too
try
smart.
I'm gonna go over there. I'm gonna handle it. I'm gonna just put these women in their place, just like what's going on right now. We're gonna just take your
Mhm.
your rights away. We're gonna just put you back in your place. So you need to come back over here and make sure you cooking and doing what needs to be done for these men. So Ogun goes, those women wreck shop, and Ogun come back. And so you have several male Orisha that go. Shango goes, Egungun goes. Like you have all these male Orisha. They think that they're gonna go, they're gonna, teach these women a lesson. They all get sent back. So they tell, so then Yemonja is about to go, and that don't work. So then Oshun is the baby. So Oshun was like, I'll go. They're like, you can't do nothing, girl. You young, you don't know nothing. And Oshun was like, I will go. So she ends up going and she takes a different approach because the other Orisha are just basically going with this authoritarian, I'm going to tell you what to do. You're going to do what I say that you're going to do kind of personality. And Oshun doesn't do any of that. Oshun decides that she's going to have a different approach by playing music. So she's, got this gourd, she's playing, she's singing, she's dancing, and she approaches a community of women. They're suspicious at first. And Oshun is like singing this song. She's like, hey, I haven't come to fight. I just want to sing and dance. And so she's singing and dancing. And before you know it, the women are singing and dancing and they follow Oshun back to the men. And so then the king is excited, he's happy, and because Oshun is the one that's able to do this. So there's a couple of things for me, and then I would be interested in your interpretations, Dr. Badejo. One is that Oshun shows leadership in that situation, and
Mhm.
a reminder to Black women to always be leaders, that you don't have to go and cut off people's heads. You don't have to, always be the one. And I'm sure you'll say your little comment about her cutting off somebody's head, but that's all. I mean, so the kind of the main thing is that we think about is that always like approaching conflict from a perspective of hostility, and that does not necessarily need to happen because she goes in a different route and she's able to get what she wants, and she's rewarded as a result of the way that she approaches it, and it's in a nurturing way, it's in a joyous way. So again, that reminder that we can approach resolving conflict in a completely different way. which is kind of a contrast to lots of people talked about in Lemonade, Beyonce's video Lemonade, and I was one of those people that was like, I didn't like the whole thing of, her being upset and people saying that she's this manifestation of Oshun, where she's hitting with the baseball bat, she's hitting all the
Mhm.
car windows out. I just didn't necessarily like that, and I know that there are different perspectives about that, because this is the perspective I always had of Oshun. It's just no, she doesn't do conflict like that. But I know that's not necessarily true now.
No.
But what's your thought?
Well, you're absolutely right. An article that, well, one of my book chapters that will be coming out probably in about within the next year, um, is talking about Beyonce and that very thing. And the reason that I think that it's very related to Oshun is because Oshun is seen as sweetness, and she is. She's sweetness, she's light, she's honey, she's all of those things. But she also doesn't take any stuff. So the story that you like, um, that I can see that smile on your face, is about the slave traders who come and capture a section of the town in Oshogbo and lead people away, and they go far, far away. But they
Mhm.
also capture Oshun in the process. And the people know who she is, but the captors don't. And so they're getting angry with her because they don't see her as taking the necessary action to stop this activity. And she keeps telling them just to wait, that it's not time yet. And they don't understand what that means because they're getting farther and further away. So they get to a particular place and they're given food and water and they don't want to eat it. And she says, no, eat the food, drink the water, and sleep well tonight. So they think she's really lost her mind now, right? And the next day, she gets people up. The captors have not come into the area yet. And she says, okay, it's time now. And they don't know what she's talking about because she hasn't laid out anything to them, which is smart because somebody would
Mhm.
have told. Um, but she keeps the plan to herself and she gets them up. And of course, they're refreshed, they've eaten, they've drank things. And she says, now I am going to take you back home. And so the people who have kidnapped them come to try and fight this particular group of townspeople. And she reaches into her vagina and pulls out a sword and cuts off their heads. Not exactly the peace loving Orisha that that she's portrayed to be all the time. And in that moment, they are able to defeat the remaining captors. And she
Mhm.
says to the townspeople, who then are afraid, they say, well, we don't know how to get back to where we belong. She says, I will fall down and become a river, and you follow the river back to the home. And that's part
Oh.
of the story of the Oshun River.
Oh.
Hmm.
Did
Yeah.
you ever remember what Odu that comes from? I love that story. I'm so glad we have it captured.
I'll have to look in my book. It's in my book.
Okay. Oh
And if you
God.
don't find it in there, I'll look it up for you.
I love that story.
It's
Yeah.
a beautiful story
Mhm.
because the metaphors in there are so strong. I mean, you can't fight anybody if you're hungry, you're sick, you're tired, and you're thirsty. You can't do that. So the first thing is to take care of the body, right?
Mhm.
And one of the characteristics of Yoruba culture, what people pray for most, is to have strength, physical strength, mental strength, the strength of character, and so on and so forth. And the body, ara, is very important
Mhm.
to maintain. And so in that story, we see where Oshun says, you got to take care of the body because you can't help me do anything if y'all are tired and hungry and thirsty and you're not getting any rest. So it's the planning. It's not a reaction. Oshun doesn't react. She plans, she thinks,
Strategizes.
she strategizes like crazy. She observes her surroundings. And then she has a plan in her head. She knows what she wants to do. She doesn't tell everybody what she wants to do when she's getting ready to do it. It's not until the moment presents itself.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Okay, we just have a few more minutes. Should we do the last two questions? Is it two questions?
I think so. I think we should talk about Oya.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to reverse them. So how does the story of Oya demonstrate a womanist worldview?
Okay, let me go back. Let me peek. You know, I told you I gotta peek and see what I said. Well, we know without even looking, I know Oya is a warrior goddess. So anytime that I see the wind blow or right before lightning strikes, I know that thunder rolling that's coming in, that's Oya announcing her husband Shango, the thunder. The story that I pick is, I think, a tricky story. And it is about when Oya and Ogun first meet. And in this particular story, Oya is a buffalo. So if people that have like symbolic representations of Oya, they will do that with the buffalo horns. So my Oya has like giant buffalo horns on it. And so Oya is walking around, and Ogun is out hunting one day, and he sees this buffalo, and the buffalo takes off the skin and turns into this beautiful woman. And so he's just like mesmerized by this. And what Ogun does is he takes the buffalo skin, since he sees, Oya hides it in the ant hole. And she goes away and does something. So Ogun goes and gets the buffalo skin and he hides it. And then Oya comes back and she can't find her buffalo skin, but Ogun shows up and he's like, basically, well, I want you to be my woman. Which, that's why I say that part of the story can be really problematic. So he wants to marry Oya, and Oya is not interested at first, but finally agrees through persuasion. We would call that something else. So the Orisha are not perfect. And she has these rules in place. And the one rule that I'm just going to talk about, the main one, is that she doesn't want Ogun to reveal who she is to anyone else. And Ogun isn't the first wife. He's already married to other Orisha, but Oshun is not his first wife, so he's got other wives. But she's like, I don't want you to tell anybody who I am. And so Oya goes back home with Ogun, and the one wife in particular that's particularly jealous. She's trying to figure out who this Oya is, this woman who's standing in her own power, just has this energy of authority, if you will. And so this wife is always trying to get Ogun to tell Oya secrets, and he won't do it. And one day, finally, he gets pressured and he reveals the secret and where the buffalo skin is and everything. And so Ogun goes out hunting. He takes his son, who is Oya's his child with Oya, and the Oya's at home with the jealous wife, and they get into some kind of little spat or argument. And the wife reveals that she knows where the buffalo skin is and that she knows who Oya is. So she's just hating on her. And so Oya goes and gets her buffalo skin and she puts it on, and she's pissed off. She's happy she's got her skin, but she's pissed off that Ogun has revealed her secret when they made a pact that would not happen. And so she goes to find Ogun. And I said earlier that he's this god of war, and she decides that she's going to stand up to him. And so then they go into battle. And she actually defeats Ogun, and their child is there also, and their son is there. And Ogun does something to the son, so he can't turn back into a buffalo. But Oya defeats Ogun. She doesn't, battle with her son. But what she does is she tells her son, even though he can't turn back into a buffalo, that he must worship her for the rest of his life, and she lets him go. And so with that story, I just think about this sense of women being reminded that you're powerful, again, that you have the right to set boundaries, but that even when you're faced with systems that seem super powerful, so whether that be a legal system, an educational system, a spiritual system, or other people in your life that seem to wield more power over you, that you can still stand up, that you can persevere, and that you can actually be successful in your fight against oppressive systems. And so I think that she's just like great reminder, because she's just like this warrior spirit that just absolutely does not give up at all. She is not having it.
Right. Right. Very powerful woman. Very.
Yes, yes, yes. I love
One of
her.
the things that I think, and I'd like to hear your comments about it, the number of women in female deities, women deities, in the tradition who exhibit various forms of power and authority. We've already mentioned two. Um, but I think that it says something about the overall corpus,
Mhm.
that there are so many women who are featured in the corpus, but who also have their own gifts and talents, but are also powerful in their own right. And not just powerful, they're decisive,
Mhm.
and they have not only minds of their own, but they know how to take on challenges. So maybe if you just, I know that's sort of a left curve, but
No, I like it. I actually like it because, so in the chapter I'm only talking about for Orisha, and I what I really did is I picked
Mhm,
out the ones that people tend to hear about. Yemonja is hugely popular, and people tend to, and this side of the world, Yemonja is the first deity that I had ever heard of. Yemonja, Osun, Oya, those tend to be like the three main ones that people hear about. Sometimes people
mhm.
hear about Obba, but not necessarily
Right.
as much. But I did choose her, and then I wrote the names of some other ones that are there. If you go to Brazil, have you been to Brazil, Dr. Badejo? Okay,
Yes.
so
Mhm.
in Brazil, then you're
Yeah.
going to see some additional deities that are
Mhm.
really well known, that I knew about academically, but I didn't realize how much people pay attention. Like Ewa, you
Mhm.
can go all kinds of places and see Ewa. You can see Nana,
Mhm.
which you're not necessarily going to see as much here. People may know about it, but about those divinities. So the thing that I have realized as you read, and I think this is why my bias is, that you have to really get into being beyond just an EFI practitioner, because I was really introduced as an EFI practitioner, and then I became a scholar, and I really started looking at stuff more broad.
Mhm.
And when I started looking at it more broad, then what I realized is like, oh wow, so this truly is a different culture. One, African women were seen as divine, as images of God, and that two, those images of God did not fit Western ideas of what women do.
Right.
And the Orisha, the female divinities in particular, did all kinds of stuff. They constantly stand in their power.
Mhm.
They do good stuff and not so good stuff. they they are seen as possessors of knowledge. They
Mhm.
are seen as the creators of banking and finance. They are considered to be warriors, of mothers, of wives. They are like, some people will say, refer to Oya, who we just spoke about, is um Ialaje. So like she'd be the owner of the market. So they're the ones that are controlling the market and the finances. It's
Mhm.
completely different. So this whole idea of like being subservient to men, you see in that story of, oh yeah, that's thousands of years old. Oh yeah, it's like, oh, see now, you committed to something and you broke your commitment, and so now I got to show you.
Mhm.
It's a totally different way of perceiving womanhood. It's as divine and as powerful. And that's why I think psychologically that it's important for Black women to understand these stories, regardless of what you believe in terms of your religious beliefs. I'm not trying to change anybody's religion, but I do think that you need to understand that somebody sees you as divine. Somebody sees your image as powerful, and somebody sees your image as the image and your energy as needed to create this earth and to make things flourish. And that changes the whole game for Black women and how we perceive ourselves if we get that. But if you only see your image is Michelangelo's cousin with that long blonde hair, you don't ever see yourself as being divine.
Right.
And so then what does that do for you? And
Right.
Michelangelo's cousin, I'm referring to Michelangelo painting his cousin for the images of Jesus in
Right.
Italy. That's what I'm saying.
Right. No, we're good. We're good.
Oh, I know you
Okay.
knew that. I was like, oh, I'm saying that, and I'm just assuming that people know like what I'm
Oh,
talking about. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's these I mean, you can see like really powerful stories of the Orisha, and you can also see the intentional way that those stories get chipped away, that they get manipulated. When you look at Yemonja, for example, so people say Yemonja, Yemaya, will say in Spanish. They have massive festivals. They have festivals here in the United States and Cuba and Brazil and Uruguay, massive festivals. If you Google Yemonja right now, it's gonna be some pictures of some white women.
mm-hmm.
Even I looked, I was like Googling, and I just wanted to see because there's actually in Nicaragua, there's a hotel that is there that I just have to get to that's called the Yemonja. And they actually acknowledge that she's an African deity. But some folks take these images because Yemonja is a mermaid. So they take these images of this black mermaid and they whiten her, and they don't even acknowledge that she's an African goddess. And so what we're seeing on this side of the world is that Yemonja is being elevated and oftentimes celebrated, but then her image is being manipulated and transformed into a white woman. So I didn't finish my thought there earlier. If you Google Yemonja and look on Wikipedia, they show this image that comes from some museum in Nigeria, and it's a white woman. That's the picture of Yemonja, and I think that not I think that is an insult to Black women because it's a theft of our history and our imagery.
I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen that. I may not. I may not have seen that one. But you're
Yeah.
right. You're right. Um, the flip side of looking at that is that that's a lot of power you got to get rid of.
Mm-hmm. 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 Now, what's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, and I wish I had it to be able to show folks, is in Brazil, in Bahia
Mm-hmm.
specifically. So, Bahia is the state. You go to Salvador, which is the capital of Bahia, and
Mm-hmm.
that's blackity black, black, black.
Yes, it is.
Some people was black, black, black.
I loved
And
it.
I love, 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 love it.
Mhm.
And there is a statue of Yemonja that happens to be Black. She got an afro and everything. I
Mhm.
love that statue. It's a huge bronze statue of her. And I think pointing towards the ocean. So that is a powerful image. But then you see all of these other images around the world. And I think that we need to constantly be challenging that. Like that
Right.
is the image of Yemonja.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of our responsibility is to reclaim our own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In our imagery. So
The good, the bad, and the ugly, and then we're challenged to fix it. Whatever's
mhm.
broken, we're challenged to fix it. Yeah. Like Oshun did, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I mean, we could go like I know. I mean, we're way beyond time, but we could go into all kinds of other things in terms of like the Orishan, like the lessons that we can learn. I mean, I think there's a lot of powerful
Mhm.
information that comes from our African traditions that we need to look at. And it's not just where I land in terms of this conversation tends to be Ifa, but it's not just an Ifa. You can look at powerful traditions. If we look, go on the other side of the African
Right.
continent and look at the divinities there in terms of Kemet, we can look, right next to us. We can look in Senegal with the Indep and the Akan people. So there are images and there's these powerful stories
Mhm.
within the spiritual systems and spiritual traditions on the African continent that I think are important. And a lot of the stuff is being written down now, and not just by um, Africans throughout the diaspora. There are also continental Africans that are beginning to look at this information.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's an important contribution to this wider discussion. I just have one comment I want to make because I know we're way past time. Uh, but I wanted to make a comment about the chapter itself.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that not only did I find very impressive and useful, but also important in terms of this work is the way that you apply it to anti-Black racism, um, misogynoir, and other issues, but also the context that you put it in terms of dealing with psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is an important step, I think, um, towards understanding. How do I put this? Towards understanding how, as a people who are removed from the source of this knowledge, maintain it in sort of a fractured way in some cases, and in other ways, a very holistic way.
Mm-hmm.
And that by marrying that, it goes back to that question about how do we put together the inner head and intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that the intuition is that we're different people, but we don't quite know how. But the inner head is part of our destiny, um, and that putting those two things together, which is what I saw in your diagnostic questioning and application, I think that we find better outcomes and outcomes that will be more relevant to us. So it is that marriage of the inner, which is our inner cultural self, and the outer, which is what we're exploring as people of African descent in the diaspora. And I think it's such a great job that you've done. It's important work, and I want to encourage you to continue.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. Like I said, I was just feeling and I'm not just saying that just to, you know, just to
Neither am I. It's from the heart.
yeah, thank you. That
Mhm.
I will accept that. I mean, that means a lot. I probably 20 something years ago, I
Mhm.
remember going to some little bookstore off the beaten path and getting your book and just reading through that. You should see my copy is falling all apart, and it meant so much to me. And when I first reached out to you like 2 years ago,
Mhm.
I was like, this lady's not going to say yes to anything. Some random person just emailing. And I have just been so honored, just to be able to connect with you, and that you just did this work and laid it out so that people could come behind you and begin to, try to understand these concepts. I mean, because it is a lot. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and for you to be working in, working with translators and, working in a different culture and a different language and, just doing that, laying the groundwork for us, I think is huge because I got to read the book in English. So that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, that was the purpose.
Yeah.
We've got work to continue. Um, and so it has its place, and yours has its place. And I'd encourage anybody who's listening to get other people to read that chapter because it's such an important chapter. And I think right now, the trauma that we're about to face again is going to require that we rethink how we approach it. The marching is going to be important. The demonstrating will be important. The petitions will be important. But our mental health is also going to be important because we know we've done this before. And we need to have something to hold on to in the process.
Yes, yes. Because we are literally in the midst of our enemies.
Yeah.
Mm. But I think the powerful thing is just to remember is like in different ways. So we see Osun, we see Oya, we see Yemonja, like all of them, all of the Orisha. And we just talked about the female Orisha, but even the
Mhm.
male Orisha, there are all these stories about them facing enemies and overcoming. And I think we can use this information to be able to understand how do we navigate the system of white supremacy and anti-Blackness and misogynoir so that we are able to remain wrapped in our mental health.
Right. Yeah.
Dr.
Very
Diedre,
important. Go
Dr.
ahead.
Diedre Badejo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ifetayo Ojelade.
See, and I love the way that she says it. People like look at me when I'm like I think they think I'm doing all that. And I'm like, no, that's how you would actually say my name. So again, thank you. I see all the beautiful comments. Thank you so much. This has been like a really good conversation. So hopefully we can do another conversation maybe when your new book comes out.
I'd love it.
Okay.
I'd love it. Thank you for the invitation and for trusting my work as a guide for you.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so everyone, I actually did this live stream this one today. This is actually part of a larger series based on the book, and I will put it in before I stop. It's Making Black Lives Matter, Confronting Anti-Black Racism. So there are folks that are here doing continuing education. And even if you have missed part of the series, if you are interested in doing continuing education, you could still do that with us because we have the entire series recorded. So you can send us an email and get connected. You can send us an email or you can go on our website, which is ahealingparadigm.com, and you can register for the series. But I hope that you were able to enjoy this. I have put the link in. So if you don't have electronic copy of the book, then you can get that for free. Again, it's an amazing book. I think all the chapters are wonderful. I happen to have authored chapter 11, but all of them are worth the read. So everyone, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.